Couple of things first. Uh, I will shamelessly plug another conference, which is first of all, my talk is in English. I know that some people are not happy about it, and I did a talk in English half a year ago in Kiev, and what I did after that is I recorded a screencast of my talk in Russian. So I will probably do it again. It will take me like, I don't know, an hour. So if you have trouble listening to a person in English when it's not his or her first language, like in particular listen to me, then just relax. It will be all right in Russian, all good. Everybody will be happy, and I'll send the link to organizers so they will post it. Uh, yeah. Next thing, there will be a conference in Kiev in about a month, somewhere in the beginning of December. I forgot the exact dates, but just to know. Yay, December something. 4th of December. Yeah, Andrei Shumada helps organizing it, and the conference is going to be great. Please come over. We came to Kharkiv, you came to Kiev, so it's going to be all cool. Yep. So the talk doesn't really have a title, but do you know what this sign is? So these signs are used by NASA for each crewed or uncrewed automated mission to space. And some of them are really, really cool and sometimes I would say bizarre. There was a military satellite that they sent, I think, about 10 years ago, and the insignia was a giant octopus grasping the Earth with its tentacles. And the motto was something like, "We watch everybody, we will reach everybody," something like that. So, but this particular one is interesting because it's from Apollo 13th mission. And that's the mission where they famously said at some point, "Houston, we have a problem." And they never reached the moon. They got to moon and back, but never reached the surface of the moon because of some issues with oxygen supply and stuff like that. And there is a movie, you can watch it, and it's amazing. Tom Hanks, all great. So I'll be talking about some problems that we have. So the title is Next, because I'd like all of us to watch what is coming next, not in terms of what new things are coming next, but in terms of what problems, what issues we have to solve next, because they're long overdue. I often talk about progress, like last year here and everywhere, and the progress is amazing, right? We usually talk about progress in terms of technology race, like we talk about libraries and frameworks, we talk about tools and different approaches we take when we use them, and just today we heard about VR, Internet of Things, ECMAScript, whatever, I don't know what version it is. All the frameworks now are native. We care about online and offline. We talk about all sorts of stuff. And the progress is clearly here, and everybody is like, yay, or nay, depending on what you do. So stuff is clearly happening. Oh, that's so annoying. I hate it. And at the same time, especially for people coming to front end from other fields, they look at this and tell about Wild West. Because over the years, and it wasn't that long ago, about 10 years ago, we cared about Dojo, through jQuery, through Jasmine, and 3JS, and Q, and we are coming with more and more stuff every day, and the letters doesn't really matter. What matters is that stuff is changing. People talk about JS fatigue all the time because it's cool. It's like complaining about Mac ports. Yeah, because what we have really is many, many alternatives for each and every library and each and every tool. And sometimes it's frustrating to choose what tools to use because the dream stack is a moving target. And dream stack is something we all keep in mind. If I use the very, very best tools for my job, I will be amazingly productive, incredibly talented, and I'll be a super developer, 10x developer. And I will deliver faster, I will be happier in my life, I will be super smart, super cool, like the very best of the best. Today, the dream stack looks somewhere like this, from Yarn to CSS modules. It doesn't matter what it is. What's here, what matters is like this slide is already old, right? And by the time I post these slides, it will be old once again, right? And this chasing of dream stack causing fear, anxiety, despair, anger. Have you ever wondered why we always argue about things? Because we transfer this anxiety and fear and bestow it on each other and try to channel our emotions and try to find the right solution, right? Because we all have high hopes for each and every new tool. We love the new tools. Sometimes we love old tools too, right? And we spend years of our lives chasing this dream stack unicorn, where the rainbows and all that, right? The race is really enduring. If you are into bicycle race, then you will understand next few slides, because when you are racing on a bicycle, sometimes you just get stuck. Your wheel is broken, I don't know, your pedals fell off, I don't know what happened, and you get stuck at some point. You just decide that you stop, and whichever technology you stop at, you keep using it for a long time. We all are afraid of being stuck. If you are using Next.js today, it's not that it's bad, it's amazing technology, but you feel stuck in that technology because everybody around you says that it's very, very old and you should migrate away, right? You can be enlightened, like decide that racing is not for you. You are more like looking at the nature and meditating on the clouds and watching and hearing birds singing and all that, and you decide that race doesn't matter really. Then you can be in a peloton, like where everybody is today. And 2 years ago, everybody was driving Angular bicycles because Angular bicycles were amazing at the time. Today, React bicycles are the best. Carbon fiber, many like gears to switch. Amazing, amazing bicycles. Some people decide that they want to be even faster. Like they decide that 1 or 2 wheels is way too much. 1 wheel is faster than 2 wheels, or maybe like 3 wheels is faster than 2 wheels. I don't know what they're doing. And they try to be these 5-6 dudes that at some point decide that it's their chance, and they start to cycling faster and faster and faster. And eventually they either break away from peloton, or peloton chases them down and they just spread in the peloton. Because at some point, everybody decides that the bicycles are better, right? So, but anyway, we kind of have this race, and everybody is pedaling. Some are pedaling faster, some are pedaling slower, but no one knows what we're actually racing for today. Because, like, who knows? I don't know what we are trying to reach. 15 years ago, everybody was talking about for productivity, and the quest for productivity was that zeal that drove us to imagine and invent new technologies and try to convince everybody to switch. But for the last 15 years, every single new technology was about productivity. It improves your productivity. You read in a README, this thing will make you more productive, and you're like, meh, right? Because, and today, as a result, no one mentions productivity anymore. It's like saying, this thing is written in JavaScript. Of course it's written in JavaScript. Who cares, right? Or like, of course it runs on all browsers. Of course it runs on Node. But yeah, it's boring. Productivity is boring today, right? And productivity became this stop word, something that we do every day. Like Who has stand-ups every day at the projects? Oh, quite a few people, right? Yeah, if you start talking about stand-ups, start talking about something, and you say the stop word, agile, right? And everybody's like, ah, agile, that's so 2010, right? So there are quite a few of these words, and the words are great, like robustness. When I was young, everybody was talking about making software robust. So whatever happens, the software continues to work. Everybody was talking about maintainability. We should write maintainable software. Productivity, scalability is a new thing, like everybody is scalable, everything is scalable today. But, and yeah, BuzzFeed is everywhere, so you won't believe what happens next because a new word comes into town, which is now a stop word, and it's immutability, right? Because it used to be cool, but not really. And yeah, once immutability joins this stop word club, I'm actually curious to see what we come up with next, because immutability was like last resort, and turns out it doesn't really help us that much. It does, kinda. Robustness does too, but no one cares. I don't know. Any guesses? What's the new thing? I have no idea. But going back to this quest of productivity, it's actually one thing that matters most, because our time on this planet is very, very limited. And if you don't value your productivity, you do not value your time, you do not value your life, or you do not value it enough, right? And the progress in this field of productivity is clearly being made. And if you look at the web apps today, they're amazing compared to like Outlook Web Access, the first Ajax application ever created. And in terms of like server side, JavaScript runtimes, we also have progress. We have progress in terms of like using JavaScript to store our data and operate our data and like synchronize our data. It's all amazing. And on mobile, we are moving from like the very first widgets to React Native and stuff. And even on embedded space, on Internet of Things space, tons of things are happening. So JavaScript is actually advancing on all fronts, and it happens, it moves, we are getting happier and happier. But every advancement to me seems like one step forward, two step back. Meteor is a good example of that. They promised us to bring real-time experience the moment they appeared, like real-time apps today. But in exchange, we had to drop everything we've built from that. I listed like DOM libraries, data mobile storage, templating, but they actually came up with their own package manager. So we had to like get rid of npm and use npm to install another thing, which was like, I forgot how it was called. Doesn't matter, right? And Meteor is not a single project to blame. It's like the brightest one, because Meteor is so bright. But the tendency is clearly here. Remember the glorious days of jQuery, where we had thousands of jQuery plugins that we threw all away because for Angular and for React then, we had to reinvent the world. We are reinventing the wheel all the time, and Bootstrap is one of the examples of that. Remember when Bootstrap came up and everybody was like, oh, Bootstrap is so amazing, but we like the CSS part, but the plugins actually suck, and we have to redo the plugins. So we came up with all sorts of Bootstrap stuff, like I'm using Ember, so I have to use the version of Bootstrap that re-implements every single package, every single component in terms of Ember. And React does the same, and Angular does the same. And Angular actually had 2 projects that were re-implementing Bootstrap. And yeah, and the CSS part of Bootstrap was not good enough, and people like, we need Bootstrap with less, and with Sass, and with stylus, and with everything. Re-implementing things based on the current popular framework seemed like the way to go, right? We promised this interoperability. We promised this glorious world of web components, but it actually never happened. Dennis Radin, who just talked before me, a few years ago came up with this interoperability solution for web components that he called, which is, yeah, by the way, interoperability is another stop word. There is a project MVC elements, like write your component in React, write another component in Angular, rub them on with MVC elements. Now you have two web components that magically work together in a single application. That was the idea. It never actually happened. It did kind of work, but it was very slow, it was buggy, and no one used it. Like maybe Denise used it for like a week or two, I don't know. And maybe he knows someone who's still stuck with that, right? But instead of like pursuing our framework authors to come up with interoperable solutions, we actually advertise the native part of our plugins. I rewrote Bootstrap into, I don't know, into React. So my Bootstrap version is actually better Bootstrap for all React projects out there because I spent time and effort rebuilding what was already there, right, in a new technology. And instead of web components, we write React components. It's easier to write a React component. It's easier to write Ember component. It's easier to build stuff out of React components instead of web components. They work better, they perform better, they run better, right? And moreover, they are not only easier to build, they are easier to sell. If I say I build this calendar and it's React specific calendar, everybody would be using my calendar. If I say this is web component calendar, it's not really React, it's kind of work with React, but I don't really know, no one would use it, right? So the crux of the matter is that all these frameworks came up with internal, very, very advanced, very, very sophisticated DOM operating layers. Virtual DOM from React, Glimmer in Ember, Angular has something, Elm has their own virtual DOM implementation, and every single framework out there now creates their own DOM implementation. And it's not that simple. They do crazy stuff, like first we recompute all the state, all the properties. Then we try to analyze how the virtual part of the DOM changes. Based on the virtual DOM change, we then come up with a list of actions that we have to do on our real DOM to turn the real DOM into a different DOM, right? And however, what they all do is they bail out on once they meet an element which is not part of their framework. Like imagine that we disconnect the rendering pipeline by adding a new technology, a component built using different framework or different library, and what we end up doing is like something like this. We have a number app. Inside it, for some portion of the app, we decide to use React. Inside that, some of our developers try to experiment with Elm, and there is Vue, and then Ember again. Today, as a renderer goes through these components, they will bail out all the times. Like I do highly optimized diffing and rendering, and then I meet a part of the tree which is not my framework, and I just don't do anything. I do not propagate properties as well. I don't have any means to like listen for changes to propagate and all that. So the Ember renderer is not aware of the React renderer. The React renderer is not aware of Elm and Vue and Ember. And instead of like working together on making the DOM faster, they actually compete for the limited resources of request animation frame and timeouts and all that. So because they're not aware, every time you try to mix and match, things sort of work, but sometimes they're kind of buggy, sometimes they're kind of slow, sometimes the change is not propagating. And debugging that, it's not easy because you come up to say React people and say, for some reason, when I'm using element-side React, it doesn't really work. And they're like, we are using React here. We will not be able to help you. Talk to Elm people, and Elm people would be like, oh, we never actually tried running element-side React. So talk to React people. It's their problem. So there is like footballing back and forth, like of people passing a blame to each other instead of like figuring out the real solution for the problem. So the component API, which we should have, this like distributed pipeline, it's something that we don't have today, and it's something that we should have today. There is clear evidence that despite the differences in all the frameworks, we have a common understanding of how components should work. So you pass bindable values, you describe your state as bindable values, you can use it for actions, you can use it for data, and there is some context that you can manipulate by wrapping components into other components, and the syntax doesn't matter. The syntax is just mix and match of all the frameworks out there, but it should be something like that. So I create a model window with some title, and inside that there is like wildcard piece of template, and what I do is like, and the outlining model provides an API where this model object, which is like constant specific, which once the model closes, it doesn't exist anymore. It just it has meaning only inside, right? So that's ABC of the component API, and we all understand it, and we did understand it way before React actually came up. But for some reason, we never came up with a common component API which we would find suitable for each and every framework out there, right? Instead, we try to reinvent the wheel all the time, right? Styles is another big problem that we have with components today, because with styles, we want all our visual elements look kind of the same. We want to have this global style. And we tried to reinvent the styling for the web platform. We came up with all sorts of different languages based on like write in Sass, compile to CSS. We added mixins, we added variables to ease this problem for us, but it never happened because the problem is fundamentally different, right? Even with this like logical architecture approaches, we end up with the same mismatch between the global styling, which we want to have because we want our applications look consistent, and the local styling, which we need to ensure that different components work together, right? Because when I want to change the component, I want this change to be localized to this specific component. But when I want to change the global style, I want all my components to look similar. Imagine you have buttons and you have like inputs, and for some reason one designer decided to use, or like that one and two designers are you on different days or on different times, before breakfast and after breakfast, I don't know. But for buttons you decided to use padding, for inputs you decided to use margin instead, for some reason, I don't know. And once you start changing the variable for like the settings of your label or placeholder inside the input or label on a button, you end up with change that would make buttons, for example, bigger or smaller, but at the same time didn't work with inputs as well because margins, vertical margins collapse, and you didn't account for that, right? And suddenly, instead of global style guide, when you change values in the global style guide, you end up with a system which, with every change, some things might break, some things might not break. And the global style guide disappears, and you end up with redoing your changes over and over and over again. We never actually fixed it. Even on a simple scenario with paddings and margins, we are running into those problems. Imagine changing styles in such a way that all the third-party components, remember Bootstrap, remember Meteor, all that, work together with us. And some components miss, like some component libraries miss big things. For example, Bootstrap has, I don't know, models, buttons, whatever, but I don't think it does grids, for example, right? So there are tons of ways to introduce change which will break the global styling. For example, sometimes people use calc, some people use JavaScript to recalculate styles on resize or something. Grids are moving in, flex layout is moving out. Once we end up with both grids and flex, we might break styles even more. I don't know, right? So conventions may work for you if you don't use any third-party components. However, most of us do, because a third-party component is a component your colleague wrote or a component you wrote a few months ago when you were not as good at CSS as you are now, or weren't as bad at CSS, I don't know. But there are some solutions that are coming from outside, right? CSS-like layouts that are coming to iOS, Android, maybe like desktop applications. People try to reuse the good parts of CSS without actually introducing much of the duplication, because CSS is massive. It has all sorts of like outdated properties, values, and all that. And we don't want to do it. Instead, what we want is minimal API that provide compatible capabilities, something that is that does the same job as modern CSS can do, but without all these many hundreds of rules that you can apply, right? So we can come up with this minimal style language, and it may be a good idea, but it may be a bad idea, because everybody remembers this standard 6KCD, which I never actually bothered to put on a slide, where you have 16 standards, you need to unify them, and now you have 17 standards. Right, life is short. Languages in general are very bad at deduplicating efforts. Have you noticed, like, every new language, when it comes up, it needs package manager and test runner and builder and debugger and profiler and like FFI, because some of the libraries are just too difficult to port, but we eventually want to port all the libraries to our new shiny language. And when we come to libraries, we actually need quite a few libraries to begin with, like stuff to talk to the network, stuff to talk to the operating system, stuff to just understand dates and times and numbers, and stuff to do things concurrently. This is all has to be done for each and every new language, and we actually do it over and over and over again, right? Package managers is a good example. Bundler is a package manager for Ruby. It's amazing. It does the log files similar to Yarn. People heard about Yarn, but unfortunately, it doesn't allow you to have several versions of the same library at the same time inside one project. NPM fixed that, but the log file was kind of no there because shrink wrapper is buggy. Then Cargo came up. Cargo is a package manager for Rust. It's written in Rust. It compiles to every single operating system. It can do both like multiple versions and locking, and it's like best things ever. And now people in Swift and Go and C++ start talking about modules and packages, and they should be looking at Cargo. But instead of like taking Cargo as is and just like renaming it to something fancy, I don't know, for Swift it could be Taylor, right? For Go it could be, I don't know, Went, Gun. For CPP it's gonna be PPC or something, right? But the trick is you can use it as is, just rename it, change the URL, make a fancy logo, and it's all yours. However, they insist on re-implementing it. Some very powerful libraries are being re-implemented. HTTP parser is a library Joint wrote for Joint supports for parsing HTTP. It's C++ code or C code, I don't remember. It has tons of unit tests. Yet Go people decided that instead of using this library, they will write their own HTTP parser that has fewer tests. And then one guy from Kiev wrote their own fast HTTP library for Go, which doesn't really have that much tests at all, and maybe that's why it's faster, because it doesn't really check for all these corner cases. But who knows, right? So we kind of assume that whichever language we choose, HTTP just works, and it's not really the case, right? And the search for interop is something that we talk about, but we never actually do, right? Because what I want to do in JavaScript is like just require a NumPy, an amazing library for manipulating large and big numbers to do like matrix manipulation and all that. But we can't do it today. We have to either like import the C part of that library and write our own bindings, or just stick with Python and coil Python as an external process. We can't use it directly, right? Java people might say, like on JVM, they have tons of languages, and it's a good step forward, but it doesn't really solve problems for everybody else. It just solves problems for a small Java world. There are other examples of that: compile to JavaScript, AwesomeJS, WebAssembly. It's something that we can potentially use in future, but not really know whether it would be possible to just require Python library, all right? And there are tons of libraries available already. These numbers I picked, I don't know, a couple of days ago. So NPM has 350,000 modules to date. Maven is 160, RubyGems is 125, and crates are listed here. It's like just 7,000. It's Rust. No one uses Rust. Quite a few, very few people use Rust, but they already wrote 7,000 libraries. These libraries are better because they are compiling like into C kind of binaries, so everybody can use crates, but it's still kind of hacky, but it's a way forward maybe. Imagine a language that could potentially like use NPM modules and RubyGems, and suddenly you have a language that has almost 500,000 libraries out there, right? We don't have it today, and I don't know whether we will have it tomorrow. So when we talk about reuse and not redeveloping, we only talk about it. We only speak about it. We never actually do it. We always redevelop. We always reinvent the wheel, right? Another area, data access. Data access is simple. I just made a request, I got data, right? However, over the time, we were like re-implementing, re-engineering data access over and over and over again. What protocol we use, what transport we use, what format we use. We always argue. There were huge wars about XML versus JSON, and today, if you talk to Go people, they're like, what is JSON? We do not use JSON anymore. It's so ancient. It's so slow. We want Drift, we want protobuf and stuff, right? The data that we operate on is a distributed object graph. No matter what kind of data we use, we can express it like this, right? I have something, you have something, we have something in common. That's a graph, right? And GraphQL is a thing that comes over and it talks about how to query graph data, but it's also not a silver bullet, because GraphQL is opaque. Once you start making GraphQL calls, you don't know how to distinguish between different calls. It's unpredictable. Add another field, and on the back we need to make more database requests to load more data, and performance tanked. That's something I talked about earlier today. And it's inversioned, which is kind of okay, but still, right? And there are other solutions as well. JSONAPI.org is the one I kind of like most. OData was out there by Microsoft for many, many years. It's amazing, right? But we keep reinventing these data access partners, data access layers. While our data access, it's something very, very different from what we normally think. Normally we think about our browsers, our servers, and our databases. But it's not what is actually happening from logical perspective. From logical perspective, you have a bunch of users who manipulate data and a bunch of backend services that can also manipulate data. And data is something we share between users and services, but we never design our data access layer in such a manner. We try, but we are not really succeeding because there are some projects that starts to do it. Operation Transforms, Share.js, Swarm.js, developed in St. Petersburg. Yay. Right? Because what we want to do is build a system that can do distributed data storage and distributed data protection, processing. This is the goal. We are building distributed systems. We are not building websites. We are not building applications. That's what we do, right? There are a couple of databases that are doing okay jobs on it today, like RAG and probably Cockroach. It's something that is upcoming. But they all are working with like simple node graphs. And in fact, what we have is, what we need is nodes of this distributed system that can work in a browser, not only on the server, that can handle rapid connects and disconnects. I got online, the new node appeared. And we want to do partial replications because when a user starts using our application, we don't want data that this user doesn't have rights to connect to read or modify to be on his or her computer, right? So this is a challenge, and it's a very, very difficult scientific problem that everybody should think about how to solve, but instead we would rather write yet another driver for MongoDB, or yet another ORM on top of MongoDB, or yet another MongoDB on top of MongoDB. Yay, for Meteor, right? We are doing something today. We think Horizon is promising, but the company went down. Meteor is great, sorry for the H, but it's kind of Mongo only, and also like once you add security, it kind of doesn't work. And PouchDB is the only thing we can really use today, but it forces us to use Couch on a server, and nobody knows how to use Couch. So, right, and all the guys who used to know are not using Couch today, so they're like, whatever, right? So what we end up is like this pipe dream of offline first. We talk about service workers and app cache, and the only real thing we use app cache and service workers today is to nag users about push notifications, right? We do not build offline apps today. And another big question is, how do you handle third-party data sources in this system? And we kind of had a solution a while ago. It's called YQL. And it doesn't mean that we have to use it today. And we cannot use it today because it's dead, right? But the idea was to being able to write SQL queries to query the whole web. It looked like something like select whatever from web APIs. It could do inserts and deletes. You could delete your tweets with this thing, right? So I use Gitter a lot. So imagine like this hypothetical situation where I want to read all the Gitter messages that that mention issues on GitHub, and I'm only interested in those messages that reference closed issues. It could be written something like this: select from Gitter messages, join GitHub issues, find the room, find the status of the issue, and then order on the post date, so the newest are coming first, right? So it's something that we could do back in the day. We don't do it anymore. It worked like this. You have a UI. You have this YQuery language proxy, which was operated by Yahoo, never open sourced, never released to public, and it would call all other APIs. You could like use special tables to register your API keys to be able to call, to authorize through GitHub and Twitter and all of the services. And we could do this for third-party services because YQL provided a unified interface, and if we would use YQL to read our data too, we would end up with a common query and storing solution for all data on the web. It was amazing, and it's still amazing, and we don't do it anymore. Data tables is a monument of that past effort. You can go in and read all the tables that people came up with. These are tables, these are like documents to describe how to convert SQL to, how to convert tables into web requests, right? Yahoo Finance was the last API they used YQL for. If you go to GitHub, there are tons of questions like, it's giving me wrong data, what happened? It was like 3 years ago, so it's kind of sad, right? Today, we could think about like GraphQL in the entire web. Instead of like writing SQL, which no one unfortunately knows anymore, we could write GraphQL, which apparently everybody knows, right? But yeah, but that's yet another API, that's yet another framework that someone has to write, and then to convince all the web out there to use it. And it's amazingly difficult. Instead, what we're coming up is with yet another thing to replace that thing that was new half a year ago. You got the idea, right? So instead of coexisting, instead of reusing, instead of sharing the experience, we are competing against each other. And the boundaries of the things that compete with each other are artificial. There is no need, there's no fundamental need for React people to compete against Ember people, and Angular people compete against React and not reusing React components. It's just no one does it, right? So we all talk about reinventing the wheel, but we always reinvent them. And I cannot say, unfortunately, I cannot say that we are getting better at reinventing wheels. We are pretty poor, right? We are getting Wheel of the Year award. This year it comes to Vue.js. Yay, it's a hot new thing. You should definitely try it, right? Is it a progress or is it a churn? It's a very, very tough question that no one can answer you, right? So to reiterate, these are the things that bother me. They bothered me 5 years ago. They actually bothered me 10 years ago. And I still see them never being fixed. These are the real struggles that we have. These are the real goals that we should pursue, right? And if you are a smart person, unlike me, and you found a solution, and you're asking, now what? For this, I have an answer, actually. And it's very, very simple. First, you have to go to London. You have to find these two people, Jake Archibald and Dan Abramov. You have to show them your solution. You have to convince them that your solution is right, and don't let them go until they are convinced, right? Then profit. Yeah, it happens. And when I say you don't reinvent the wheel, you probably should just convince right people to use it, right? And please don't glorify those who do. I wrote a new framework, I wrote a new library. You actually often do more harm than good, to be honest, right? Once again, that's the list, and that's me. That's all.
Thank you. Questions? Lift your hands up.
You can find Dan Abramov and Jake Archibald on video, so you can learn how they look.
No questions, really? It's so clear.
Yeah. Maybe some of you... Oh, someone has a question.
Yeah, there's a question. Wow.
Do you hear me? Thank you for your speech. And could you please share what do you actually do to stop this mess?
First of all, I became enlightened. I do not pursue the next libraries, the next frameworks. I talked about it last year. You can watch it on KharkivJS channel. And second of all, I try to convince other people to do the same, not in like choosing a framework that I chose, but like focusing on the real issues. I always look into what can be done. I argued about CSS modules, that they are not a solution, for example, and like data access layer is something that I always like read about and think about. But you have to understand that I do not work at Facebook or Google, and that means that my position is very, very limited. And I don't know, it's hard. If I knew how to solve these issues, I would be solving them.
Yeah, hi. And why Dan Abramov and Jake Archibald, actually?
Okay, so that's a good question. All right, so yeah. So a couple of years ago, Jake Archibald was, you could replace him with Paul Irish. And before that, you would list Paul Irish and John Resig, the author of jQuery. So you have to understand that Jake Archibald represents the developer connection branch of the Chrome team, the largest browser that defines the web today. Despite the fact that some of us may not be happy about the whole arrangement, Chrome is very big, and if they want to bring something to the web, they are the best browser to actually succeed. Dan Abramov represents the framework, the largest framework on Earth that we use on this planet today. And for some reason, he's incredibly convincing. And at the same time, there are precedents. When he was locked in a room with Ember people and came up, he wrote Create React App. So it seems to be working, right? So locking him is a good idea. Jake Archibald, just to make sure that these ideas are met in the browser world. So that's like the minimal number of people you have to convince. Like, so it sounds easy. It's not as easy as we'd like to, because they're easily convinced once they see something then with their own eyes. That's why you have to go to London. And getting British visa is another topic. Right.
More questions?
Oh, over there.
Well,
first of all, thanks for your talk. And my question is, what do you think about that reinventions, like wasting of the time? Sorry if I understood you wrong. But anyway, is that possibility that we should make some evolution like this? We'll test things, we'll try how it's working, we'll find some mistakes, and then we'll reinvent another wheel. Maybe it would be bigger or smaller or wider or something like this.
Mm-hmm. That's a good question. It's about the growth of our industry. Our industry is not really an industry today. We are not manufacturers of software. We are artisans. We are like those people who were making shoes and making locks and hammers in the medieval era. That's who we are today in a world of computing. So we do invent things over and over again, and sometimes brilliant ideas come to several people in other places of the world. But at this point in time, it's incredibly difficult to make these ideas spread. When Henry Ford came up with the idea of using assembly line to build cars and like these super specified workers, it took very few years for other automakers to adopt his idea. It was actually patented, so they kind of had to wait, but it didn't took hundreds of years anyway. Right? So ideas in that industry spread very quickly today. Toyota comes up with something, everybody adopts it. they sometimes have to pay licensing fees, but anyway they do. Tesla came up with a good solution for electric cars, and now other manufacturers are building their cars, and they're pretty good too. The new Chevy Volt is okay car, right? Nissan is okay car, but in our industry, the tribalism is still here. If someone comes up with a great idea, but this idea come up in a different tribe, in a rivaling tribe, other tribes would be very reluctant to adopt it, because they would say this is something those tribe is doing, and it's not our idea, therefore we do not use it. Build, like unified build system, is something Ember people enjoyed since 2013, for 3 years already. We've been past this fatigue. We never seen this fatigue, because there are like 5 or 10 guys in an Ember team who are improving builds for us, and the rest of the community is kind of freed from that, and we are just piggybacking what they built. And they try to convince other people. They talk to Angular people, they talk to React people. They managed to convince Angular team to reuse at least some of that in Angular 2, but the React people were like, Webpack is the best thing since sliced bread, so we'll use Webpack. And that is sad, because Webpack is another idea which is like one step forward with like hot module replacement and all that, but 2 steps back, because everybody has to fight the bugs in Webpack. So, yeah, until it changes, until we will not be successful. And if you look at our industry as a whole, it's all about folklore. It's all about holy wars. Towers versus Spaces, Vim versus Emacs, like JavaScript versus whatever, Ruby versus Python, Angular versus React. We like to argue. We like to rival instead of cooperate. We try to be cooperative, but we are unfortunately very bad at it. I don't know why.
Hey, you said put those 2 people together in the same room, and we'll figure out what to do next.
Yes.
But React, Facebook is pushing React, Google is pushing web components.
Yes.
And they're competing. They're not really compatible in any way. So it's a dead end if you put those people together.
Maybe you will be the third.
Well, maybe.
So yes, there are like interests of industry, and it plays a big role. And I don't really want the web as a whole to become vendorized. There are vendoring ecosystems, like everybody in Apple world listens in Swift world or Objective-C world listens to what Apple says. In .NET, until the API is part of .NET, no one uses that library, or very reluctant to even add the library to their code. Web was federated for a long time, and now it gets centralized more and more, and mindset of people who are doing web is getting centralized. Unfortunately, among the people who listen to Google and Facebook, we are losing more and more people who do not listen to either of those companies, or listen to them not as dogmatically as everybody else is doing. I want people to be more open-minded about it, but at this point it seems like it's a battle that we actually lost already. Maybe not. If I were in web standards, I'm actually using Firefox, so I'm not. I'm still struggling to accept the harsh reality of monoculture. Everybody was like, Internet Explorer was horrible. Yay, we're using Google Chrome now. Why all our users are using Google Chrome now? And it's like another separate battle that we have. And I think Jake is a pretty good guy. And like talking to Jake directly, talking to Dan directly, they will be more keen on listening to you, and maybe they will change something in future and come up with something which works better for everybody. I would love people to like continue writing React so that they don't have to re-implement everything they did, but that React would be using web components under the hood. And for me, in parallel Ember world, I would be like, import that React component and it would just work. This is a pipe dream that we have. If I knew how to solve it, I would get a London visa.
Hi, continue your last idea. I'm actually afraid of it because fixing some standards actually limits gene pool for evolution. I'm happy that we have some standards like TCP/IP. Without them, there would be no internet. But we have some very bad things fixing standards. I think that actually the idea that we have to develop applications in HTML and JavaScript that were not designed to do applications at all is actually a horrible accident of standardization. Don't you afraid of the things that someone, well, not me, not you, someone greatest mind on the earth, will create this good standard, convince that to guys, and that still would be a mistake. Because every next framework will have to match that standard, even if it's actually bad, if we find in 5 years that it's bad.
Yep. That's a very, very good question. And that I don't know how Ukrainian textbooks look like, but in my childhood, in the biology textbook, we had this image of evolution. And there was like, you go on a plane, and there was like a rectangular plane, and everybody would get into different directions. And then some quality improvement would arise, and some would go up onto a new plane. And then we would diverse again. So to me, and you can also go down, right? And then diverse. So to me, it seems like we are diversing for quite some time without actually any quality leaps. And I'm worried today that we're actually going down. Because people are kind of like, why are we using this web thing? And they try to, like, with instant apps on Android, have you heard this thing? When you download only a portion of an app, and it's Android API instead of web API. But other than that, it's kind of webby because you still, like, don't load complete app. You kind of try to load only the parts that you use. And as you go from pieces to pieces, you kind of load more and more of this app. So it's something that companies are trying to actually reinvent again. And we can lose this battle too. We can lose the web battle. So yeah, we can talk afterwards. I want other people to ask questions. Okay. Yes. Yes, so I want to evolve. I don't want to be extinct. Is that okay with you? Yeah, I don't know.
All right. Thank you, Andrei.
Yeah.
Andrew?